Look at the timer. Good morning, friends. Hope all of you are good, doing well and safe, and all of you are studying. You are getting lot of time to study, yeah, and you are helping your parents too. So today we are going to discuss something regarding fetal surveillance. So assessment of fetal well-being. Already we all of us know that there is almost 80% of fetal death and fetal compromises which occur during the antenatal period, and the remaining 20% in the intrapartum period or in the postnatal period. So this is why here now we have so much, there is a decrease in the maternal mortality rate. We have almost come to a very good this one regarding maternal mortality. So the focus now has shifted from maternal mortality, definitely maternal mortality is one of our issues, to the fetal health and fetal well-being. So how we will assess how is the fetus inside the womb. So as there are various concepts of Adbhat Matrutva, that there is a fetal origin of adult diseases. So many things are there which can be, we can halt the progress of the diseases if we take care of the fetus during the intrauterine life. So today we are going to discuss how we are going to do it. So this is antepartum fetal monitoring is an important integral component of our antenatal care for good maternal and fetal perinatal outcome. So the objectives, the primary objective of doing the antenatal fetal monitoring is to avoid the fetal death. So reduce the fetal morbidity and mortality. Avoid the fetal death. That is the main primary objective of doing the fetal assessment during the antenatal period. And all of you know the total antenatal period from the start of conception. Now the things have been shifted not only during after conception but before the conception. So pre-conception, we are doing so many things in the pre-conception period also, so that we can avoid some problems with fetal and maternal both during the after conception. So as in a preconception period, we are giving folic acid tablets to avoid neural tube defects. We are screening the mother for thyroid disorders. For the most important thing is blood sugar, so that there will not be complications for the baby. So to avoid many congenital abnormalities in the baby, we are taking care during pre-conception period. So the has shifted from not only in the antenatal or after conception, but before conception. So this period, periconceptional period, is very important. So in the during antenatal care, so main objective is to avoid the fetal death, and the second, the main thing is to ensure that there is a satisfactory growth and well-being of the fetus. So the baby is growing properly. There are various methods. When we discuss individually, we'll see that how we are going on, not only clinically, but there are various tests which are available to see that the fetus is growing well and having a satisfactory growth inside the baby's inside the mother's womb. So the objective of antepartum fetal surveillance is to identify the high-risk patients complicated either by the pre-existing medical disorders or any obstetric complications that are developing during the antenatal period. So there are several methods which are available to perform the fetal surveillance. So common indications. So what are the indications for antepartum fetal monitoring? The pregnancy with obstetric complications. So the commonest complications during this one which can happen is intrauterine growth retardation, multiple pregnancies, polyhydramnios or oligohydramnios, Rh isoimmunization. Pregnancy with previous medical complications, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, epilepsy, renal or cardiac disease, infections. Main important thing in India, it is still tuberculosis, which is very common. Then SLE, any autoimmune disorders. There are some other indications. Nowadays, so the age of marriage has been shifted. So the age of first conception also has been shifted. We are nowadays very much seeing that because all the girls are getting very much educated. They are doing all the jobs, so they're postponing. There is a voluntary postponement of the first conception. So they are always in a comes in a, this one a maximum thing as a elderly primary gravitas. So for the first conception, more than 30 years of it. So advanced maternal age, previous bad obstetric history. This is also very important. We will see when we are investigating a case of previous bad obstetric, any previous stillbirths, recurrent abortion, previous birth of a structurally anomalous baby, any congenital abnormality, structurally anomalous, and then like the most common anomaly, anencephaly, spina bifida, neural tube defects, or the chromosomal abnormalities like trisomy 21, which is very common in India. And it is a part of routine even if there is nothing, there is no obstetrical complications, there are no medical complications, there are no high risk factor, but still as our part of a routine antenatal testing, will do this fetal surveillance. So what are these components of fetal assessment? How we can assess the fetus, how it is inside the womb. So we can do with clinical monitoring. There are various tests available, either biochemical, biophysical. So what are this? We will see in a detail. So clinical monitoring, as you all of you know, you are coming to the clinics, you are seeing that you are seeing the patient. So whenever any patient comes to you, what we first do is take a detailed history. So all of you know what are the components of the history taking, what are their chief complaints, what is their menstrual history, previous obstetric history. So in previous obstetric history, what we'll ask, if there is a, what is the outcome of the her pregnancy, previous pregnancies. So that if she comes into a high risk case regarding any bad obstetric history, past history, in past history, any past history of any medical disorders that we ask. So by history taking only, we can give the patient whether group the patient in a low risk and high risk category. So after that, history taking will be clinical examination. First is general examination. So in clinical monitoring, so in first visit, so during first visit we'll do all these things. So detailed history taking is very important. So first antenatal visit, and nowadays everyone is coming, some people are coming for preconceptional advice, do too, but maximum people are coming after they have conceived. So the first antenatal visit in the first trimester is very important. So detailed history taking and examination. In general examination, most importantly is her baseline weight, height, what we said. And then throughout there will be how much weight gain she is having. Then her pulse rate, blood pressure measurement. So first trimester, if she is coming and her blood pressure is more, so that helps us to divide the patient whether she is having a chronic hypertension or she is a case of pregnancy induced hypertension. Usually pregnancy induced hypertension will be after 20 weeks of pregnancy. So the first trimester examination is very important. Then first PV examination to assess the size of the uterus, height of the fundus if she is coming in the second trimester. Then presence of edema. Then other things as she is going to come in frequent visits. So all of you know how many visits should be there minimally. So in initial till 28 weeks, it should be monthly. Then after 28 to 36 weeks, every 15 days. Then after 36 weeks, it is every weekly visit. So what we will assess during this antenatal visits is the clinical monitoring, clinical examination, so her weight gain. So in second half of pregnancy, the average weight gain is around 1 kg in the 15 days. So whether the patient is getting proper weight gain is there or not. So first trimester, some people will get either weight 1 kg is minimum. Some people will lose if they are having excessive vomiting, they will lose. But so that we should, what is the importance of weight management? That we have to, when we know the baseline weight, whether she is reducing, she is getting weight, she is getting excessive weight gain. This is also important because excessive weight gain, mainly if it is more than 5 kgs in a 1 month, if she is getting that much in 1 month, that means there is a water retention, and the water retention is the first sign of getting preeclampsia or pregnancy induced hypertension. If the lady is not gaining weight, the weight is constant, or she is reducing the weight after the first half of the pregnancy, that means she is not gaining weight. So either there will be problem with the baby is not gaining weight, or there is a placental insufficiency. So, or liker is less. So we have to find out whether there is an intrauterine growth retardation, IUGR, the signs of placental insufficiency. I already explained that this blood pressure measurement first visit is very important to know whether it is a pre-existing chronic hypertension or pregnancy-induced hypertension, because this is one of the component of placental insufficiency, and ultimately it is going to affect the fetus by getting impaired fetal growth. Then during clinical examination, after the 12 weeks, we'll assess the size of the uterus by palpating the fundus. All of you know this obstetrical examination. So, and symphysiofundal height from the upper border of the symphysis pubis till the fundal height upper border. When we measure with our ulnar border, we will measure with the tape. And after usually 24 weeks, the distance in centimeter, it corresponds to the periods of gestation. So measurement of symphysiofundal height, and second one is like this, and we will plot a graph by symphysiofundal height and weeks in gestation. So after 24 weeks, usually it is once it growth, it is corresponding. So that gives us an idea of whether the fetus is growing inside properly or not. If it less than 10th percentile, then we have to suspect the fetal growth restriction, and we have to go for further more investigations. Then clinical assessment of liker by palpating in a second trimester or early third trimester. When we palpate, if the fetal parts are felt very easily, that means clinically the fundus height is not corresponding to the period of gestation, that we have to suspect that if there is a oligohydramnios, or if there is a over distension of uterus, the height is more than the period of gestation, it can be polyhydramnios. Then presence of edema over the feet, whether it is a physiological edema, pathological edema. Then the measurement of the abdominal girth. Usually this is important in last trimester, where the lower border of the umbilicus, we will measure the fetal umbilical girth. So these are the clinical things. So first trimester, during each antenatal visits, we have to take a history, do her general examination, and obstetrical examination. By this, we can monitor whether the fetus is good, and then auscultating fetal heart rate. So fetal well-being. This is a clinical monitoring. Then we'll come to biophysical monitoring. So in biophysical monitoring, there can be some antepartum test and there is intrapartum test. So in this class, we are going to discuss regarding only antepartum. Intrapartum things we'll discuss in next class. So there are several methods which are available to perform the antenatal fetal surveillance. And as we have said, that is a clinical. So maternal assessment of the fetal kick count. So these are the antepartum tests which are available: fetal movement monitoring, non-stress stress, contraction stress test, biophysical profile, modified biophysical profile, Doppler ultrasound to see the Doppler velocimetry, what we say as. So these are the things which are the biophysical tests will be used for monitoring. So what is the basis of this test? The basis of biophysical profile is, so the biophysical profile is a screening test for uteroplacental insufficiency. So the fetal biophysical activities are initiated, modulated, and regulated through the fetal nervous system. All of us, we know this. And the fetal nervous system is very much sensitive to the diminished oxygenation. So when there is a hypoxia, there is a metabolic acidosis, and there is a central nervous system depression. So that will affect the fetal biophysical profiles. So the first thing in this is fetal movement monitoring. So in fetal antepartum surveillance, the first thing is, so why this is important? Usually the loss of fetal, and this is a very easy test. If we explain the mother, if we tell her how she should do, this is very simplest method of fetal assessment, that no need for any gadgets available. So mothers usually perceive 88% of fetal movements when they are detected by the Doppler imaging. So when we are doing the clinical examination, or when we are doing ultrasonography, and when we see the fetal movements, and if you ask the lady, she will definitely say that yes ma'am, I am perceiving the fetal movement. So 88% mother, they will receive the fetal movements when they are detected. So usually they should perform this, we should tell the lady that she should start counting the fetal movements after 28 weeks of pregnancy. So before that, they may not be much, sorry, able to perceive the fetal movements clearly. So after 28 weeks, because the baby is small and the liquor is more at that time, the baby easily can move in the intrauterine environment. So how do you do the fetal monitoring? So a loss of fetal movements is commonly followed by the disappearance of fetal heart rate within next 24 hours. This is, they have found out that when the lady is not perceiving fetal movements, absolutely there is a loss of perceiving fetal movements. Usually within 24 hours, the fetal heart rate also goes. So this can give the, when she will come with the condition that she is not perceiving the fetal movements, we should be very vigilant for that. We should auscultate on the Doppler also, we should see, and first thing we should counsel the patient. She'll be very much in a worried. So our counseling is very important. So either anything is, sometimes what happens, the maternal hypoglycemia is also associated with increased amount of fetal movement. Sometimes the lady will say that there is a decreased movement, sometimes she will say that there is an increased movement. So when she is saying that there is an increased fetal movements, so somewhere the fetus is in distress. So the one reason more important is maternal hypoglycemia. So we have to counsel the lady for that also, when she feel, she has to report if there are excessive fetal movements or when there are less fetal movements. Both wise they should be. And also the other thing is maternal, there is a sleep awake cycle for the fetus also. As adults, they sleep when there is a night, the adult will sleep. Like that also, the baby also has to sleep and awake cycle. So when the baby is sleeping inside the uterus, the mother will not feel the fetal movements. So we have to counsel the mother also regarding that. Sometimes she will not feel fetal movements at all because the baby is sleeping. So maternal perception of fetal movements may be reduced with fetal sleep. Sometimes if there are any fetal anomalies are there, and if there is an anterior placenta, if there is an increased amount of liquor, polyhydramnios is there, she may not be able to feel very well the fetal movements. And if she is obese or the mother is on any drugs. So in history taking, the always we take a drug history. So if the mother is any on the narcotics drug, any antidepressant drugs, because it will reduce the fetal movements, reduce the respiratory movements of the fetus. So history is very, very, very important. So these are the things. If she's smoking, that is also a thing. We habits we ask in personal history. We ask if she has a habit of, she's a chronic smoker, and hypoxia. So all these things, history. That's what I said. Clinical examination is very, 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 very important. Then Cardiff's counting. So how we will tell that the fetal movements, for perceiving the fetal, whether she is not able to perceiving the fetal movements or not. So this is Cardiff count of 10 formula. So what is this Cardiff's count of 10 formula? The mother start counting the fetal movements at 9 a.m. in the morning, and she will go on counting the fetal movements till they become 10. After 10, we will tell that no need to find it out. So contingent when there is a 10 movements are perceived. When she is perceiving the fetal movements. So when she has to report to the physician, if there are less, we will tell the lady that start from 9 a.m. there should be at least for 12 hours she should count, or she should count every 1 hour after each food, so that there is no hypoglycemia also. So 1 hour, so at least in 12 hours she should have 10 movements. Now they are saying 10 hours 10 movements, or in 1 hour 3 movements, and multiply it by 4. So if there are less than 10 movements during 12 hours for 2 successive days, because not in one. And if even if there is no movement even after the 12 hours in a single day, so less than 10 movements during 12 hours for 2 successive days, or no, at least not a single movement which is perceived even after the 12 hours in a single day. So this is the kick count, and this counting, the counting of fetal movement was first suggested by Sadowski as early as in 1973. And this is a method of fetal well-being. This is the simplest method of fetal well-being. So daily fetal kick count, we always say DFMC. A daily fetal kick count or daily fetal movement count, DFKC or DFMC. So 1 hour duration each in the morning, noon and evening, 1, 1, 1, 3 hours. Then total count is multiplied by 4. This is if, so it becomes 12. So if there is a diminution in number of kicks to less than 10 in 12 hours or less than 3 in 1 hour, it indicates that there is some fetal compromise is there. So randomized control trials in Denmark, it has deduced that if there is a, we explain the lady to keep a DFKC, fetal movement count, there will be 73% of reduction in avoidable stillbirth. So we can, there are some stillbirths which can be avoided because of this chronic hypoxia, sudden stillbirths. And so with only fetal kick count, we can reduce the stillbirths by 73%. In contrast, other large study, international study, they said that there is a no significant difference in avoidable late fetal deaths between the women who were instructed to count routinely and controls. This is because of the subjective thing. So what the Cochrane review said, the Cochrane review says, though more number of babies at risk of death were identified, we can identify as early as, so what the Cochrane review says is, there is, hello? అమ్మ నేను దీంట్లో ఉన్నానమ్మా, క్లాస్లో ఉన్నాను. So the more number of babies at risk of deaths were identified and no reduction, but there is no reduction in as such perinatal mortality. But we can identify the babies. So this is the first thing which we can do to reduce the fetal mortality. Then what we'll do? If the lady has come with a reduced perception of fetal movement, so what next? Next is when she comes with, you'll do clinical examination, we'll listen with our Doppler or with stethoscope or with scope, anything. Then what we'll do, it will ask for to go for ultrasonography. The other test what we do in a late, this one is non-stress test. So NST is a simple non-invasive test performed in a pregnant woman beyond 32 weeks of pregnancy. So why beyond the 32 weeks? Why this test is not before that? They said that after 30 weeks or mostly it is after 32 weeks. This is very simple to perform. It is relatively quick, and the most important thing, it is a non-invasive. We should always go for a non-invasive testing. So because why after 32 weeks is autonomous nervous system will be fairly well developed after 32 weeks. So we can do this test after that. So what is the principle behind this test? So the principle behind this test is when the fetal moves, there is a reflex acceleration in the heart rate. So when we measure, we'll know the baseline heart rate, and when there is a movement, there is always the fetal heart rate increases. So the principle behind the NST is there should be acceleration in the fetal heart rate with fetal activity. And it is usually the fetal maturity is reached, the autonomous nervous system is raised at 32 weeks of gestation. And this test is valuable to identify the, this is where more important. And here we will be, if NST is reactive, that means we are sure that the fetus is well. So this is the test which tells us regarding the fetal wellness rather than fetal illness. So how it is done? In the NST, the acceleration of the fetal heart rate in response to fetal movements are considered to be the hallmark of fetal well-being. So presence of reactive fetal heart rate tracing is the definitive hallmark of fetal well-being, and it is very well reassured. So we are very well reassured that the fetus is well inside the womb. So NST, a continuous electronic fetal monitoring of fetal heart rate along with the recording of the fetal movements is undertaken. And there is observed association of fetal heart rate acceleration with fetal movements. When present, it indicates it is a healthy fetus, is a reliable screening test. It is not a diagnostic. As I said, it is a reliable screening test, and there is a false negative is around 0.5% and false positives around 50%. So how we will do NST? There is a simultaneous recording. I was sorry for this bad this one. It is actually, there is a simultaneous recording of the fetal heart rate and uterine activity. So fetal heart rate is recorded with Doppler ultrasound. There are two probes. When we come to you must have seen the machine in the labor room, which have cardiotocography machine is there. So we can do with normal Doppler or this cardiotocography machine. So fetal heart rate is monitored by Doppler ultrasonographic device or the skin surface electrodes on the maternal abdomen. We put a one toco that we called as a toco, we put on at the level of the fundus, because all of you know that the contractions, waves or anything starts with the fundus. So usually we put that probe on the fundus, and then we hear the fetal heart rate, where that can be with maximum clarity and laudable. They are valued with fetal things. So uterine activity, and the second thing is the fetal heart rate with Doppler and uterine activity with tocodynamometer by and there on the monitor we can see it. Nowadays LED, LCD all are there. On the monitor we can see the graph, or we can put a paper and we can see on the paper. So the test result may be reactive. Reactive means reassuring, non-reactive, non-reassuring, or inadequate. It is not giving us any report. So what are the criteria for the reactive or reassuring NST? So normal baseline heart rate, all of you know, it is in between 110 to 160. If it is less than 110, bradycardia. If it is more than 160, tachycardia. So heart rate between 110 to 160, normal beat to beat variability. The same continuous, like you must have seen in the movie, there will be a monitor which has been put, and in that some operative will be going on, and in that monitor, ting 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 ting, like so it is going, and sometimes ting sound will come. A straight line will be so a straight line is not good for us, for as doctors, for anything. We always have to have a pulsation. So here also the fetus beat to beat variability also we should see. So that how much it should be? So 5 beats per minute. And the most important thing is when there is a movement, this one measure will give it in mother's hand, and will tell her that when the baby moves, you press that button. So when the baby moves, she will press that button, and on that graph we will I am giving you the intrapartum test, I will show you that graphs on. So two accelerations, there should be two accelerations, minimum at least 15 beats per minute above the level of baseline and during the 20 minutes periods. So these are the criteria. These are the three criteria. The baseline heart should be there, rate should be normal, there should be beat to beat variability, and there should be two acceleration, and there should be no decelerations. Deceleration means the heart rate should not go down. So this gives us the reactive NST. Non-reactive NST, when these all criteria is not met, and there is no fetal movement, so no reactivity, absence of any fetal reactivity. Inadequate test means we cannot get any tracings. Adequate fetal heart, it is not proper. Either the mother is not pressing properly, we are not able to get good because of the obese abdomen, or polyhydramnios, not able to find the things properly, or the baby is not well inside, or the machine is not working. So all these things can be there. So when there is a problem, always what we do is we do NST after we ask the patient to have eat her meal, to have something, eat some juice or something, drinks, and then we will take the NST. If it is not, we are not, then we'll increase the more amount, more than 20 minutes. We'll extend this more. Again, 20 minutes stressing will take. Even if it is not, like usually we say that it should be in the morning. Then we will again repeat it in the next day. Again, we'll repeat it. So still it is not coming properly, then we can give what is called as a vibroacoustic stimulation. And this VAS is used to change the fetal. Sometimes what happens, the baby is sleeping. When we are doing the test, the fetus is sleeping and the mother is not able to get the fetal movements. So we are saying that there is no movements in 20 minutes, but we have to see that the baby must be sleeping. So change the time. Or do what this vibroacoustic stimulation will be do. It will change the fetal sleep from state of quiet, that is NREM, to active sleep, and we'll stimulate this one with the vibroacoustic stimulation, and we'll see like this thing. All of you ENT, you have known that how you check putting the onsen behind the ear and the mastoid process, like that only we will put, and there is a vibroacoustic stimulations, they are available. If they are not, with the probe also we can do. And a reactive NST after VAS indicates that the baby is reactive. So you should not jump to the conclusion that there are no fetal movements, the NST is non-reactive, unless you have taken care of all these things. So what we will do if the test is non-reactive? The test will be repeated later in the same day, I said after food or something, or we'll do some other tests to see that whether the fetus is well or not. We can do contraction stress test in a late pregnancy, that I will tell you as a confirmatory when NST is non-reactive inadequate. But before going for what I will tell you what is contraction stress test. But before going to, because we are going to do something invasive in contraction stress test, so we will go for non-invasive test. So studies shows that the risk of fetal demise within 1 week following a reactive test, even if the NST is reactive, it is 3 in 1,000. So that's what I said, false positive and false negatives. But when NST is non-reactive, so mind this. So when NST is non-reactive, the perinatal death is around 40 per 1,000. So that means it is a very good screening test. So if it is non-reactive, then you should be very, very, very vigilant. So then another one is contraction stress test. So the principle of this is uterine contraction can compromise if the baby is not healthy. So we go first for NST with the fetal movements. Then if with fetal movements there is a deceleration, the heart rate is not proper, there is no beat to beat variability, that means this baby may not be healthy. And if this baby goes in labor, it may not be able to survive that the contractions of the uterine contractions, that stress of contraction, and can have intrapartum hypoxia. So uterine contractions can compromise an unhealthy fetus. This is the basis of contractions. Nowadays we are not doing this test regularly. This is just to mention, I'm telling you. So the principle behind this is the pressure generated during contractions can briefly reduce or eliminate the perfusion in the intravillous space. So when there is a perfusion, the blood supply is less, there will be definitely hypoxia. So healthy fetoplacental unit, if it is there, they have sufficient reserve to tolerate the short duration of reduction in oxygen supply, reduction in blood supply. But if there is any pathological condition, uteroplacental insufficiency is there, there is a problem in the fetus, so respiratory reserve may be compromised, and there is a reduction in oxygen capacity, which results in fetal hypoxia. So like NST, CST also measure fetal heart rates and uterine contractions. So if there is no spontaneous contraction, sometimes we also know that Braxton's contractions will be happening, but the mother will not be feeling that there are penless contractions. So we can measure with that contractions also, but in a late, after 37 weeks or initially, this is admission test. Mainly it is an admission test. Contraction stress test is a admission test. Here we can When we want to do induction, here it is called as a oxytocin challenge test, where we give IV oxytocin and see with the contraction. And this will only when we want to induce, mind it, not for the normal thing. When we are already Radhika madam has taught you the induction of labor. So what are the indications for induction of labor? At that time only we'll do this. So like that, we'll monitor fetal monitoring. This is the machine where we'll get a graph, tachometer, uterine contractions. This is a sensor. Then here one sensor which give the heart rate and the contraction. If happens, what happens? There is a reduced in the blood supply in the intervelar space. Then the fetal gets this one, how it behaves. So this is CST is considered completed if uterine contractions have spontaneously occurred within 30 minutes, each lasting for 40 to 60 seconds, and frequent 3 with 10 minutes, like a normal adequate uterine contractions. What we will say, 3 uterine contraction, relaxation period between 2 contractions should be 1 minute, and minimum 3 contractions, each lasting for 40 to 45 seconds, like that. This is mainly in intrapartum. This one, positive if lead decelerations are consistent with association with contraction. So what are this deceleration, lead deceleration, early deceleration? We'll discuss in detail in intrapartum thing. Negative if it at least 3 contractions, there are no without any associated lead deceleration. So suspicious means there is occasional or inconsidered. Here it is NST reactive, we are happy, but CST negative, we are happy. So negative is good. So negative CST is more reassuring than reactive NST. With chance of fetal demise within 1 week of a negative CST is only 0.1 per 1000. However, if a positive CST follows a non-reactive NST, the risk of stillbirth is around 88 per 1000, and mortality is also 88. So this is the very, very, very important. But this is an invasive test. Statistically, about 1/3 of the patient with positive CST will require caesarean section persistent if there are decelerations. So what are this we'll discuss in detail in intrapartum testing. So the other because they are invasive. So other non-invasive tests, which can be very easily done, are ultrasonography. So all of you know that from first trimester till 3 trimester, at least minimum 3 ultrasounds are compulsory. Minimum 3. One in first trimester at 11 to 14 weeks, that we say that early, where we are for early fetal congenital abnormalities we are seeing. So 11 to 14 weeks scan, then 20 weeks scan, TIFA for congenital abnormalities, then one growth scan 28 to 30 weeks, and the last where fetal biophysical, so fetal well-being, last trimester, 37 weeks, 36, after 36 weeks. So, so what is this biophysical profile? We are discussing in late trimesters. So it is a combined NST with other parameters by real-time ultrasound. This is a real-time thing. So there are the first Manning has described this biophysical profile. So original biophysical profile and modified biophysical profile is there. So there are 5 parameters that based in there, and each one parameter has given 0 to 2 scores, and the total score is determining the course of action, what we should see. So the biophysical profile scoring by Manning in 1992, we observed it is at least 30 to 45 minutes is there. So this is the thing where in a biophysical profile, it is a time consuming. The operator should be very, very, very patient when doing biophysical profile. So as we see that this was originally described by Manning and his colleague as a method of evaluating the fetal well-being during antenatal period. It is a standard tool. It is a standard tool for antepartum fetal assessment. But what is that? It is a time full is 20-30 minutes, so it is a time consuming. It requires adequate technical compatibility to evaluate the USG parameters correctly. And what is there? So what is the minimal criteria and what is the score? So NST, it should be reactive, score is given 2. So normal score is 2, abnormal is 0. Fetal breathing movements, at least there should be more than 1 episode of fetal breathing in 30 seconds. That is given 2. So one breathing movement in 30 seconds, then gross body movements, extension, flexion, gross body movements, like tilting of this. So any body movements or limb movements, more than 3 movements should be there during that period. That is given 2. So more than 3 movements, more than 1 breathing movement, and muscle tone. For muscle tone, extension, limb extension, flexion, trunk, it's been seen. So at least there is 1 movement for flexion or extension, that is given 2. And the most important is amniotic fluid. Here, what they will do is they will measure the greatest distance, vertical height in the deepest pocket. So more than 1 pocket, if it is measuring more than 2 centimeter in 2 particular points, this is giving the number 2. So if we do amniotic fluid index, what is index? That we divide the maternal abdomen in 4 quadrants by vertical, by the longitudinal line at the linea nigra and transverse at umbilicus, and each quadrant starting from anti-clockwise or clockwise, wherever, but we should be methodical. So our probe should be perpendicular to the line. So when we are keeping the probe perpendicular, we will measure the deepest pocket length. In that pocket, it should be the hypoechoic area without any cord angle, fetal cord. There should not be any body parts or cord should be seen. So without any this, we'll measure the length of that, and we will add all 4 quadrants together. So BPP scoring, if it is 8 to 10, there is no fetal hypoxia, so it is a good score. So we can repeat it if it is in a weekly interval or more, regarding of how it is a low risk or high risk case. If it is a 6, so some parameter is less, the number is 0. So there we have to suspect the hypoxia. So if it is more than 36 weeks, 37 weeks, by doing the other pulmonary maturity test, we should consider for delivery, but we have to see which parameter is less depending upon this. But if score is 4, then we have to suspect chronic hypoxia. If it is more than 36 weeks, deliver. If it is less than 32 weeks, we'll repeat the test immediately after 4 to 6 hours by giving left lateral position, giving hydration, oxygenation, and again we will repeat the test. But if it is 0 or 2, then it is strong suspension that then we have to again immediately repeat the test. And if it is persistently, and deliver if it is whatever is the gestational age. So the likelihood of in utero fetal demise within 1 week of reassuring test is 0.6 to 0.7 per. It is very, very, very less. So reassuring BPP is very, very important. So what is modified biophysical profile? Here in this I am not mentioned. In modified biophysical profile, we'll only take 2 things, AFI and NST. So if these 2 are good, there is no need to measure fetal tone, breathing movements, body movements, anything. So NST and AFI. So if either the NST or AFI is abnormal, then we can go for complete biophysical profile. Because I said already, told you that this is a time consuming test. So if NST and AFI is good, then no need to go for elaborate. Here, this can be finished within 15 to 20 minutes. What is the advantage? It is simple to perform and greater patient compliance is there. And there is no definite evidence to show that this BPP is better than modified BPP or vice versa. The other thing is, next is, one of the first method to see the fetal compromise is the abnormal velocimetry. So if there is abnormal umbilical cord Doppler velocimetry blood flow pattern is the earliest thing which can give us a clue for fetal compromise. And the next is to be baseline variability and fetal heart rate followed by loss of breathing movements. So fetal tone and fetal movements are the last parameter to show the abnormal changes. So for that is the reason Doppler ultrasonography of fetal umbilical artery. So Doppler velocimetry is very, very, very important. And this is the first thing which can give us clue regarding the hypoxia. So what is the indication for this is when there is a non-reactive NST or it is a high risk pregnancy. So fetal Doppler velocimetry indicates may be reflective of fetal respiratory compromise with varying efficacy. So Doppler of umbilical artery may show similar or slightly better efficacy in predicting the perinatal outcome. Measurement of fetal middle cerebral artery Doppler peak systolic flow velocity may be done to predict the presence and magnitude of fetal. So each fetal here we see the maternal vessels, fetal vessels. Fetal vessels are fetal umbilical artery and middle cerebral artery. So two for respiratory compromise is umbilical artery, and to know the other things in fetal anemia, any congenital malformation, it is a middle cerebral artery. We don't do in any this fetal Doppler velocimetry has replaced the invasive test, like I told you, contraction stress test. So need not go for any invasive test. This is the best non-invasive test we can do it. So arterial Doppler velocimetry waveforms are helpful to assess the downstreams of vascular resistance. So changes in the ductus venosus are thus a matter of serious concern in which the patient has to be delivered as early as possible. What we will measure? So what is the principle of this is, if there is a poorly functioning of placenta, so placental insufficiency is there, there are vasospasm is there, infarctions are there is an increased resistance to flow. So we will measure peak systolic velocity, diastolic flow, we will divide systolic plus diastolic, pulsatility index, then resistance index. This you may not go in detail for this. This is a PG thing. Particularly, it is fetal diastole. So two commonly indices is systolic in diastolic ratio, SD ratio, and resistance index. So it is. So umbilical artery Doppler velocity measurements are mainly for to know the placental insufficiency, that is intrauterine growth retardation. So what is more important is, I will show you the flow charts. Absent or reverse end diastolic flow. There is a flow is absent or it is a reverse. Is seen in most extreme cases of IUGR and associated with high mortality rate. If it is absent, within 24 hours we have to deliver. If it is a reverse, immediate delivery of the baby is required. So umbilical artery Doppler velocity measurements in conjunction with other tests of fetal well-being can reduce the fetal mortality by because of IUGR by almost 40%. Then Doppler measurement of middle cerebral artery is also used for assessment of IUGR, but they are mainly for fetal anemia. So this is a normal flow. Fetal umbilical artery normal flow is like this: systolic, and this is a reduced end diastolic. This is a systolic flow. This is a diastolic flow. If there is a reduced end diastolic flow, see this parameter here. Can you see? Systolic flow, systolic, and then comes to diastolic. Diastolic, this is diastolic flow. Here, this is a systolic flow is normal, but diastolic flow has reduced. So it is a reduced end diastolic flow. Here, you can see only systolic flow is there, but there is no diastolic flow. See, can you see this gap, hypoechoic area? So this is an absent end diastolic flow. And can you see here reverse? It is below this line. So there is a systolic flow, but there is no diastolic, and it has here we can see the waveforms. This is a reverse end diastolic flow. So these are the Doppler velocimetry patterns. And when when there is an absent and reverse end diastolic flow, then we should take the immediate action. So what are the other assessment by ultrasonography? What other things we can see? Viability of the fetus. In early pregnancy, why do we do scan for pregnancy dating? So that if she doesn't remember her menstrual period, or the cycles are irregular, there exactly we can calculate her expected due date by early first trimester ultrasonography. Then to know whether there is a single pregnancy or multiple pregnancy. If there is a multiple pregnancy, chorionicity, that can be done during first trimester easily. If early first trimester, nowadays early TFAs, 11 to 14 weeks, their maximum abnormalities, congenital abnormalities can be diagnosed. So detection of congenital abnormalities like anencephaly, we can diagnose this very early. Then the placental localization. Then ultrasonography, as it is a non-invasive test, we can be repeated. So for patients compliance, it is very easy. and very good. So we can repeat the biophysical profile if in a high risk cases like UGR, oligohydramnios, pregnancy-induced hypertension, diabetes. So any pregnancy complication, any obstetric complication, any medical complications, the ultrasound we can repeat it, or we can do some adjunctive procedures along with. So ultrasound is very important, one of the best biophysical markers. We can do amniocentesis that I will discuss in biochemical, chorionic villi biopsy, amniocentesis, chordocentesis, version, external cephalic version that we have seen in breech presentation. So ultrasound estimation of gestational age during first trimester, what is more important is CRL, crown to rump length. Gives accurate prediction of gestational age for this. During second and third trimester, the anatomical measurements. So biometry, biparietal diameter, head circumference, abdominal circumference, femur length, all these things can give us how the fetus is growing. So usually the measurements variation by what we say that in first trimester it is around 4 days, in second trimester around 7 to 10 days, in third trimester also same. So that can be the variations with ultrasonographic monitoring. So antepartum fetal surveillance for if there are twins. So if there are dichorionic twins, usually we do with clinical examination, then by ultrasound to know how they are growing, both the twins, whether they are growing properly or no. So growth restriction can be, ultrasound is very important, know the IUGR in first one baby. Doppler is also. If there are monochorionic twins, that there can be complications in monochorionic twins like TTDS, TRAP. Already twins has been finished. So you know what is TTDS, what is TRAP. So as early as to diagnose this, ultrasound is very important. So in monoamniotic twins, every 2 weekly the ultrasound should be done to know how the babies are growing, how is the Doppler ultrasound also should be done. So arterial Doppler waveforms are helpful to assess the downstream of vertical and measure the peak systolic and diastolic, and venous are only about the cardiac function. So this is all regarding biophysical. Now we'll come to biochemical testings. So nowadays in biochemical testing, early first trimester, you know that first trimester abortions, the commonest cause of early first trimester abortions are chromosome abnormalities. So there are various tests, screening tests. So first trimester screening, second trimester screening tests, which are biochemical tests available for screening. So previously they used to measure only alpha fetoprotein, but nowadays there are various other markers which we are measuring. This we'll see afterwards. So first trimester. In first trimester at 11.5 to 13.66, we see that combined screening. Combined screening means on ultrasonography, we measure the nuchal thickness and presence of nasal bone, then C for tricuspid regurgitation and ductus venosus flow. This we will see on ultrasonography and biochemical markers. What are biochemical markers? We call it as a double marker. So in this double marker, what we measure is pregnancy associated plasma proteins, placental proteins, sorry, not plasma, it is a placental proteins, and serum free beta HCG. So this is the biochemical parameter. This is a biophysical parameter. We combine, when we combine both the tests, the sensitivity is around 85%. Here, usually these screening tests are to know the chromosomal abnormality, and the most important is trisomy 21. So this is done in 11.5 to 13.6 weeks. When we do ultrasound in that, where also if there is an absent nasal bone, if there is an increased nuchal thickness more than 3 to 4 millimeter, if it is there, then this is one factor can be suggestive that this could be a baby with Down syndrome. Then we should go do the further testing. Then in second trimester, this triple marker test has been obsolete. Now we'll do only quadruple marker, and that is done in 16 to 18 weeks. And what are the things which are done in quadruple marker is alpha fetoprotein. So maternal serum alpha fetoprotein, estradiol levels, HCG, and inhibin. These are the 4 things which are secreted, and this is called as a quadruple marker. Which gives us, if suppose the patient has not come in first trimester, she has come in second trimester, then she can go for quadruple test. So quadruple test, so it can be sequential. First trimester, second trimester, sequential. It can be combined. It can be both. So both first trimester and second trimester, if it is done, the sensitivity is around 94%. So I said alpha-fetoprotein is an oncofetoprotein produced by yolk sac fetal liver. It is peak around 32 weeks, test usually 16 to 20 weeks. So if it is 2.5 multiples of median, then with adjustment of fetal weight, ethnicity, age, very important. So where it is elevated? It is elevated if, first thing, if it is MSAFP elevated, you should see that it is a wrong gestational age, open neural tube defects, multiple pregnancy, RH isoimmunization, IUFD. But important is low level of alpha fetoprotein. If there is a low level of alpha fetoprotein, that gives trisomies, mainly Downs, then gestational trophoblastic disease. So if it is elevated MSAFP 85%, it is neural tube defects, high values, high resolution ultrasonography. Then if it is coming, then we should go for 4D ultrasound and targeting imaging of fetal ultrasound, high resolution, or other invasive or non-invasive, NIPT, non-invasive prenatal testing nowadays are available. So we can go for that also, or invasive testings. So these are the invasive testing, prenatal diagnosis, invasive testing for chromosomal abnormalities, congenital abnormalities, so chorionic villi biopsies, amniocentesis, chordocentesis. But nowadays we are more in favor of non-invasive prenatal testings. So NIPT, which are very much available, we can do with the FISH techniques. So where techniques are there, gene arrays are there. So non-invasive testings initially we are preferring, and if they are not giving us the conclusive diagnosis, then we go for invasive testing. So what are the invasive things we are available? Early in first trimester, it is chorionic villi biopsy. Second trimester, amniocentesis, chordocentesis, usually in second or third trimester. So chorionic villi biopsy can be done transcervical or transabdominal. Usually it is because the most important complication with chorionic villi, because that is an invasive test. What we do is here, we with needle will take the chorionic tissue. So there can be limb reduction defect has been found out with this chorionic villus biopsy. And this is trophoblastic material for study we take is trophoblastic. We culture and preparation will send for karyotyping, and here in this there is a chance of fetal loss by 0.5 to 1%, but this is very accurate, but it may need amniocentesis, and usually in first trimester, if it's safe, it is better to do it after 10 weeks to reduce the chances of limb reduction defects. So amniocentesis usually done in second trimester, early in it is 14 to 16 weeks. So because the report, the karyotyping report, at least it will take 3 weeks, and if it is any abnormal, we have to give them option for medical termination, which is legally this one till 20 weeks only. So these are the things when that early intervention is always very useful. So here in amniocentesis, desquamated fetal cells are cell fibroblast, fluid for biochemical studies, sent for culture. It is very accurate, and but it is risky and more traumatic to the mother, because if they more traumatic to the mother, because there is already the baby has grown, must be some movements she's feeling, 5 months of pregnancy, then it is more traumatic physically and psychologically also. And if we advise termination, then it is more traumatic and more risky also. Chordocentesis and 18 to 20 weeks, fetal white blood cells are tested for infections, mainly for the infections and biochemical studies. So fetal loss is around 1 to 2%, is highly accurate, but it is also same thing, it is more traumatic. So other biochemical tests, what we do is when we want to know the fetal pulmonary maturity, when we want to induce here for a maternal indication or fetal indication, when we want to induce the labor to know whether the fetus is mature or not, we'll do some tests like amniotic fluid, lecithin sphingomyelin ratio, then Sheck test or bubble test. So LS ratio more than 2, that indicates that the baby is mature. We can go for induction. If it is less than 2, then we will go give glucocorticoids, 2 doses. You all will know this. So presence of phosphatidylglycerol comes at usually 36 weeks. So that indicates lung maturation, 37 weeks. Then fluorescent polarization test we can do. The most important is amniotic fluid optical density. Here, this test we do in Rh negative. So in Rh negative class isoimmunization, when we want to know if there is any hyperbilirubinemia, this test is done. Presence of lamellar bodies, orange color cell, it is usually for the anemia, and amniotic fluid turbidity. So these are the things, the biochemical test which we do in a antenatal period. So to conclude, what we'll do: first trimester ultrasound, early first trimester ultrasound for dating ultrasound, that is the most important thing. Then we can 11.5 to 13.6 weeks, we go for combined test. 11.5 to 13.56 for NTNB scan and biochemical markers, double markers. So it is low risk, intermediate risk, high risk. If it is low risk, is more than 1 in 1000. So there are no risk, no need to go for further investing. If it is a high risk, less than 1 in 250, or they has less than, then these people should go for further testing, either quadruple marker or invasive testing or NIPT, depending upon the factors. In between intermediate also, they should go. So cytogenetic studies, biophysical, biochemical markers. If the congenital malformation has been found out, give option of termination. If they are not, then clinical monitoring, DFMC, normal, monitor clinical monitoring. If abnormal, anything finding, go for NST. If NST non-reactive, go for biophysical markers, routine. Then modified BPP, normal, repeat. And if it is abnormal, depending upon the parameters, we have to take the decision. So this is all regarding antenatal monitoring of fetal well-being. So our learning objectives were to enumerate the objectives of fetal surveillance, to enlist the various types of fetal heart rate deceleration and describe the characteristic of reactive and round reassuring fetal heart rate, and describe the management of abnormal CTG, what we will discuss in next class. Thank you. Any queries? Only.